Let's get it. There was an episode of Sister Wives earlier on in season 6 where the Sister Wives were invited to UNLV by an anthropologist named William to have a discussion with ex-polygamists about the subject of polygamy. Now, I thought that this episode was particularly interesting because, like I said, I came into watching Sister Wives around season 16 and 17, so I already had an idea of what was going to happen. When I first heard about the concept of the show, however, I'd already came to the conclusion that pretty much what happened in season 16 and 17 was what was going to be the end result. So it was nice to see how the Sister Wives interacted with the confrontation of the presentation of these ideas that, hey, maybe your marriage isn't as strong as you think it is, maybe it's not going as well as you think it is, and maybe things aren't going to turn out the way you believe they will. Right off the top, I gotta say that from the reaction of the Sister Wives and their hesitance to participate in this discussion, it came off to me that TLC had in fact forced them into this discussion. I'm aware that at some earlier point, I think it was around season 6 or season 7, they had talked about canceling the show. And if they canceled the show, realistically, Cody and the wives would be in a heap of trouble because they didn't have the financial wherewithal or the financial independence to be able to go on and continue to make money, because a lot of the money that they had circulating throughout the family was either a direct or indirect cause of the show. For instance, they got obviously a direct check from TLC in their participation of Sister Wives. But they also, when they talk about, oh, we have this marketing business that we're, it's really exploding and growing, that's the multi-level marketing business that they were involved in that allowed them to reach certain heights within that organization because of their participation on a TLC show. The way this was presented was a little off-putting because the way the 4 panelists came into it, the people who were opposing the Sister Wives, they came into it like a discussion. They were trying to express their side, their opinion. They've watched the Sister Wives for 6 seasons or 5 seasons up to this point, and they've been giving a flowery description of what polygamy is. They wanted to give the other side of it. What is the negative side of it? What is the dark side of polygamy? And of course, the Sister Wives wanted to approach it in the form of a debate or argument. So they came in extremely hostile, extremely, divisive, and trying to tear them apart at everything, that little thing that they said, to try to establish that the Sister Wives' way of life was actually normal and it should be accepted. Now, off the top, TLC's Sister Wives had a huge deficits when it came to this discussion/debate. Cody already came out and wanted to portray himself as the poster child of what polygamy should be like and how it should function, and that he was in fact not only the ideal polygamist husband, but the ideal husband, period. And they've tried to push that narrative throughout the beginning of the show, like Cody walking around smiling and bouncing around from house to house, kissing the wives and trying to be involved with the kids that clearly he had nothing to do with. And that's, as an aside, you can always tell, for you fake ass parents out there who don't really spend time with your kids, when you're in the supermarket and you pretend to play with them when they're in the cart, like you see somebody coming and all of a sudden it's like, hey, boo, 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 and the kid looks confused because you never talk to them, and everybody knows that you don't really deal with your kids, so you need to stop it and actually spend time with your kids, and you'll develop those little cool quirks. Cody wanted to have that whole thing, so anytime they talked to him about like the negative sides of polygamy, he would just refer to it as, oh, you painted this with a broad brush and you have to look at the individual cases and how our family functions and how our family works, because we're more the rule than the exception. Whereas the anti-polygamous people were saying you guys are more the exception than the rules. Now, one of the audience members got up and they asked Cody directly, well, how do you deal with your children? They asked him, frankly, how many children do you have? At the time, he had 17 kids. How do you deal with each one of their needs, and so on and so forth? And then the wives started chiming in, and Cody started saying, oh, well, I deal with the kids all the time, and I'm always around, and I'm better with the kids than most parents, period, including polygamists and monogamous people who are just dealing with one-on-one kids. I'm so involved with my children. Now, we've seen the show. Now, we all know that that's categorically not true. Like, this guy is a horrible parent. Like, if anything that they've said is just, like, if it's all storyline and it's all scripted, then that's bad. But if there's even a remote truth to any of this stuff, as far as what he did to Isabel and her surgery, what he did to Maddie and her daughter when she had to go for a major surgery, and he couldn't be bothered to go down there and check on his granddaughter. At the same time, he had a daughter going to New York to get her back done, and he couldn't bother to be involved with that. The whole mess with Truly, Gabe and Garrison, and the list goes on and on and on. Like, this guy has problems. So even just on the sheer number side, if you have 18 children, there's no way that you're paying attention to these children in the ways that you should be. There's no way you're meeting their needs. There's only 24 hours in a day. I don't care whether you're a monogamist or a polygamist. There's only 24 hours in a day. So if you have 18 children, you can't even give them really 1 hour out of your day for each child, because at some point you're going to have to sleep, you're going to have to go to work, and God forbid you have to spend a little bit of time with your wives. The way Cody presented it is that he's basically running daddy daycare, and he's always around and always has time for his children. Now, one of the things that I noticed even earlier on, when they had these kind of interactions between the sister wives and polygamists, or they had the question of polygamy and the viability of it, typically what they would do is they would have somebody who wasn't a polygamous family or wasn't into polygamy, like Cody's old friends, and they would criticize the idea or principles of polygamy, and Cody would just come back with his wives and say, they have no idea what polygamy is about. They don't know. They just judging us based off of some prejudice that they carry. Or if they did talk about another polygamous group, they would focus on the FLDS group, which is the Warren Jeffs group, where they had a whole bunch of people get prosecuted, Warren Jeffs included, the leader, for a whole bunch of terrible, horrible things. And they all get to decry that these are terrible people, and they make us mad too because they're not an example of what happens in polygamy. From that regard, Cody tries to normalize polygamy by uplifting himself and downplaying all the misdeeds that are done by polygamists. And if you ever challenge him on it, then he'll just simply say, you don't understand. The problem that he has in this debate, which is why it was really good and I thought it was set up really well, is that he not only had people who were in polygamy, because the first woman that they had, Christine Marie, she was actually a Mormon who was conned into becoming a polygamist. She was part of the Mormon faith that doesn't believe in polygamy, and somebody used her religion against her, which is part of the reason why you have to not only understand your faith, but it's really important that you have people challenge you with your faith, because if they challenge you with your faith, it causes you to ask questions. When you get your mindset that you don't ask any questions about the things that you're a part of, then that only leaves you vulnerable for other people to come in and manipulate you, because you've never had those questions asked, and you're taught not to ask. You ask as many questions as you need. You have a question, you ask a question. And that's what I always push, because when you become a part of something, you need to understand the thing that you're a part of thoroughly. The second person that I wanted to point out was, in fact, a person of the FLDS church. This is a young man by the name of Willie Steed. And you could tell that this guy, you could see it in his eyes, that he's been through a lot and he's seen a lot. And for the most part, my heart goes out to him, because you could see that he's damaged. And likewise, there is a person who was already previously on the show by the name of Colleen. She was a person who was on the show very angry, and for the most part, when she was on the show originally, they downplayed a lot of her story. And I still think that even when we found out a little bit more about her in this particular episode, there is so much more that they did not talk about or address on Sister Wives, because it was so outrageous, so vile, and so disgusting that it would have turned a lot of people off of the very concept of polygamy. Now, the thing that I'm talking about is that she was actually forced to marry her second cousin. In addition to that, she said that her blood sister, the sister that she shared with her mom, married their half brother, which is, again, even nastier. So this whole thing is revolting. And as it turned out, Colleen, and I later found out, just kind of bouncing around looking for clips and stuff for this particular video that I'm shooting now, I found out that this is actually the family or the group that Mary's parents or her mom was a part of. And this is the group that she grew up in. I'm not saying anything happened to Mary. I'm just saying that this is a part of the group. So this is actually hitting pretty close to home, because now you're starting to get people that was in Mary's group and she grew up in polygamy, and this is part of that group that's coming out saying that they disagree with the whole concept of polygamy. So it's hitting the foundation. Finally, you have Kristen, who is Christine's aunt, who came out and said that she opposed polygamy, and she is a part of the AUB. Not only is she a part of Cody's church and the Sister Wives church, but like Christine, she's actually closer to the blue blood line of this particular faith. So the same way Christine is royalty because her grandfather was somebody, was a founder or a prophet in that particular faith, that's her father. When the Sister Wives was having these discussions, they could always fall back on the idea that you don't know what you're talking about because you're not part of our group. Our group is different. Your groups are freaks. Our group is the ones who are special and they hold this as a sacred sacrament. Your group treated it like trash. She's saying that everybody I know was having a bad time with this, and you guys are not the rule, you're the exception. One of the things that the anthropologist brought up was actually threefold. He said that of the families that he knew that were successful with polygamy, it only came down to three things. That one, they had plenty of money and resources, which the Brown family at that time, they were doing financially well, which is why I think they held together for as long as they did. The second thing that they needed to have in order for this to work was there had to be fairness amongst the sister wives. Everybody had to be equal so that nobody would rival one another or feel that they were being slighted or mistreated. Obviously, that's not the case because everybody who watches these videos can say clearly that Robin was the favorite and is the favorite, even today. So that doesn't exist. So you already got one strike out of the three. All the sister wives had to be friends. They all had to get along. Now, this makes sense because no house divided amongst itself can stand. And so if all the sister wives valued each other, they respected each other, and they looked to each other for friendship, then there wouldn't be as much room for jealousy, envy, hatred, dislike, distrust, and so on and so forth. So those three things actually make sense. And I would even add that there's a multitude of other factors that have to go into even proposing or trying or attempting to do this. Like, I think there has to be a certain level of maturity on behalf of the husband and the wives for them to be able to even have or engage in the initial conversation to start this kind of family. And even then, there's so many problems with trying to do this. Each one of the sister wives kind of played a role as far as this debate was concerned. Mary pretty much stayed quiet, or at least as much as they exposed her or filmed her. She didn't have a lot to say, so I'm going to give Mary a pass on this particular debate. She did have like a couple points, but it's not really of note. Cody's role in this particular situation, it was a little rough because his job was basically to minimize the damage of the polygamy storyline or what people thought about polygamists. So he tried to tamp that down and say it was all because of bigotry and misunderstanding that people had this bad idea about polygamy. Then, of course, there was Janelle. Now, Janelle's role was to uplift the victims, to make the women who oftentimes in these polygamous or poly relationships, which typically are polygamous in nature, where the victims lie because the women are being taken advantage of in these situations. She tried to make it seem as though the women in these situations are far more powerful than Cody are, and they're making all the decisions. And a lot of times you see this, whether it's swingers or polyamorous relationships, they always, the women have all the power, they get all the choices. But then when you start to boil it down, the women have very little power and control, and in many of these situations they're just made to feel like they have the power, or they're told they have the power, but in actuality they don't. And that's one of the more, it's one of the more heart-wrenching things about this particular type of setup. But Janelle's position was actually, we can watch a video or clips that I put together from 2013 and most recently from 2022. Let's take a look.
I make my own paycheck and I have my own bank account. I don't share with Cody.
And again, that's kind of that I'm a strong woman, I'm a strong independent woman, hit me raw, back up off me, sucker. I take care of myself, I don't need no dang on Cody. But because she's tied into the family, and that in and of itself is not true, and the way that the family is functioned up until this point, and we're starting to see a lot of the cracks of what the way the family functioned. This is what Janelle had to say in 2022 when the seasons 16 and 17 were being filmed.
Dude, you have a house. You go home and you live in the house with Robin. I have no house.
I love how Janelle was like, I have no house. Like she was breaking it down. I have no house, sucker. I'm homeless. And you already living in a house with your other wife that you love and is your favorite, sucker. And I'm living on the street. I'm sleeping in a box, fool. And it's not even so much that I'm laughing at Janelle's situation. It's very heart-wrenching to watch her sit there and struggle with the idea that she's put so much into the family and she's gotten so little out. Now let's take a look at Christine and the role she played. Christine's role was to uplift women and uplift the victim. Janelle was to even the victim out, make the victim more human, make the victim seem like, oh, they're in control, they're okay. And Christine's role was to uplift not only the victim, but to show that there is a relationship between the victim and the abuser, and that relationship can be functional because the abuser is actually going to take care of them if they choose not to be in a situation anymore. And we all know how that ended. So let's go back to 2013 and see what Christine had to say.
Cody actually said specifically, look, if you're not happy, I will give you money and you can leave. If that's what's holding you back is money, that means nothing. You get your freedom.
I'm gonna tell you now, that's a hurt piece. It kind of hurt to watch that because Christine had no idea. Like she was under the impression that Cody was a good guy who was gonna look out for her and he was gonna provide for her as long as she's happy. And if she wanted to leave and the only thing holding you back is money, girl, don't you worry about the money. I want you to be out if you ain't happy. But then as soon as she tries to leave, Cody starts singing a different song as far as the money goes in 2022. Let's take a look.
Christine and I are only sharing mine and Christine's shared assets 50-50. She doesn't have any access to the rest of the wives, their assets, or even my assets that are shared with the rest of the wives.
Now that's a hurt piece. So essentially what he was saying was, Christine and I are just going to share Christine's stuff. And by us sharing Christine's stuff, what that means is I'm going to take half of Christine's stuff. Again, this is part of that financial prison that he tries to place her in because he puts her in a situation where she can't leave. And ironically, as mentioned before, because the sister wives are in the unique position that they're in, she actually has assets for him to even think about trying to take or keep from her. Typically in these types of relationships, there are no assets for them to walk away with. Like for instance, even as Christine mentioned in this same segment, if she would have been on Coyote Pass in that one home and they would have all been living together, if she would have left with nothing. Unless you're getting Cody to sell that home that he lives in with Robin, that money is tied up in that house. And there's too many other people that's tied up on that money. And there's too many other people that can make claims to that money for you to go back and try to sue them out of the house. And you can put a lien on it, but that only works if they sell the property. And unless they have the money in the bank, which they probably don't, knowing them. Like maybe you can get them to return some of them Amazon packages, you can get some of your money back, but otherwise you're stuck. Now, of course, finally, I could talk about Robin and her hypocrisy. You know, as they talk about like freedom and leaving, in season 17, Robin clearly said, oh, well, you think you can leave? No, you can't leave unless the church approves this, Cody's approves this, the family approves this, everybody got approves this. That's pretty much how Robin did it. Finally, I just say that if the series was scripted and the series is not true and it's all the storylines are fake, like so many people suspect and believe, the truth of the matter is the Sister Wives originally got involved with the series and the reality show business because they wanted to express the normalization of polygamy and how can be a positive force within relationships. The truth of the matter is they did a piss poor job, especially being as though the way things turned out. Now, if they did that and they got wrapped up and fell for the money, they got hooked on the money train and it causing to question their integrity. However, if they were being genuine and sincere and any of this is true in the way that they proceeded with the show, then it makes it a little harder to watch because you see how naive they were earlier on in thinking that this type of relationship is actually viable and could work for them. That's my take. I'm James. This has been My Take on Reality, and I'm out. 'Cause I've been living life.